welcome to all of the listeners and viewers. Yeah, to have to listen to me twice in 1 week. But fortunately, today I'm not going to be talking for more than an hour, just a couple of minutes. Kevin Mullane works for us at PSG. He's got a BA Honours in Computer Science and joined us here at PSG April 2021 after a long stint at Vodacom. He nearly has 20 years of experience in technology and digital transformation, and he currently serves as our enterprise architect and head of group platforms, where he leads the firm's cloud modernization, our digital platforms, and emerging technology strategy. I heard Kevin present to our Exco at the end of last year, and the moment that he spoke to us and he spoke to where AI is going and how AI is going to affect us, I immediately phoned Lizelle and said, listen, this is a talk that I believe all of our intermediaries, all of our members should hear, because it is not just I wouldn't say frightening, but it does give you a very, very good perspective of what the future is going to hold. Kevin works at the intersection of business and technology, helping financial services organizations adopt new and emerging technologies to improve those client experiences, operational efficiency, and long-term competitiveness. So Kevin came back and said he would like to give us a little short talk about where AI is moving from beyond simple productivity tools and becoming a core force shaping the future of financial intermediation. So you are more than welcome to ask and post questions in the Q&A. If Kevin is finished, then I am going to throw some of those questions at him and see if he can answer all of those burning questions that you might have. So to give Kevin as much time as possible to talk to us, Kevin, thanks for joining us. Over to you.
Thanks, Ronald. That introduction smelled a lot like AI, so I'm assuming you're as good at ChatGPT as I am. Thanks, everyone. Welcome to what should hopefully be about a 30-minute chat, and then we should have plenty of time for questions. So as Ronald mentioned, feel free to drop questions in the chat and he'll bring them through. AI and the intermediary. There is a bit of tension in the room at the moment, just in general. AI is moving much faster than a lot of us expected. I don't think 2 years ago any of us would have said we would be where we are today. And over the past year, the conversation has very quickly shifted from whether AI matters and is this going to be a thing to how quickly will it matter and what do I need to do to stay on top of it. Just in terms of the industry, McKinsey already estimates that generative AI will unlock hundreds of billions of dollars annually in productivity. Goldman Sachs says that about a quarter of all tasks in the financial services industry could be augmented or automated in the next 2 or 3 years. And pretty much every single major global financial institution is already embedding AI into their core workflows. So AI is here. But at the same time, AI is not about to replace us. It doesn't carry any accountability. It doesn't have any professional indemnity. And most importantly, and I think this is the important thing that we have to land, it has not earned any client trust. So the balance we need to kind of understand here is AI will reshape our industry, probably faster than we expect, but also slower than we fear it would have. The real question, I suppose, at this point is not whether to panic or ignore it. The real question is what exactly is going to change and where's it going? And what does it mean for us on a day-to-day basis? So I wanted to start this morning's conversation with these 3 questions. First up, why does this moment feel different from previous technology cycles? We've all been through these hypes before. Why is it different this time? We've had digitization, automation, online platforms, all kinds of cool things. So what makes it different? Second, where is AI actually going next? Do we know? Does anybody have a crystal ball? Is it just productivity tools and chatbots, or is there something more structural emerging? And then third, what happens to the intermediary in all of this? Does this diminish the role? Does it transform the role, or maybe even elevate it? And we'll go into some context on that. Importantly, these 3 questions build on each other. And if we understand the shift, we can understand the trajectory. And if we can understand the trajectory, then hopefully we can understand the implications of these changes. So why does it feel different this time? For decades, from a technologist point of view anyway, in financial services, technology has improved efficiency in a big way. We digitized client applications and onboarding. We've automated underwriting workflows. We've streamlined claims and other large-scale processes. We've built online platforms. And all of that really mattered. But those systems, when you think about it, were essentially mechanical. They process transactions. They move data from one place to another. They helped us to reduce paperwork. What they didn't do was engage with the thinking layer. And it turns out that thinking layer is where the value actually lives. What makes this wave of technology different, in my opinion anyway, is not just that AI is powerful. It's that it works directly with the same materials that you work with every day. When you prepare for a client meeting, what are you working with? Probably some client needs or fact finding, some existing policy documents, some product comparisons, maybe some regulatory requirements to understand how it all fits together. And the value isn't in filling in the documentation. The real value that we bring is interpreting the information. But what's interesting now is that AI can read and understand that material. It can compare two policy documents. It can summarize regulatory updates. It can draft suitability reports, and it can flag inconsistencies between client needs and the product structure. And I think what's most important now, AI could summarize a PDF 2 years ago. It's been a thing. We've been chatting to ChatGPT for well over 2 years at this point, but it did so in isolation. You uploaded a document, it summarized it, gave you back a summary, end of interaction. Next time you wanted it to write an email, it did that and gave it back to you. What's changing now, and what's important in the kind of the latest technology developments, is the changing context. As AI becomes embedded into all of the systems that we use, it's going to gain access to product information and product libraries. It's going to gain direct access to compliance frameworks. It's got anonymous but direct access to client information and needs. It's got a view of all of our historical interactions, and is directly involved in the workflow steps as we drive our businesses on a day-to-day basis. So it moves from answering a question, what's in this PDF or writing this email, to actively participating in the process. Tech used to be just a calculator. The difference now is it's becoming effectively a junior analyst. If older waves gave us better tools, this wave gives us a better team. And importantly, it's not replacing judgment, but interacting directly with the things that inform that judgment. And that's an important distinction. And when technology begins to operate on the same materials as professionals operate on, there are a few things that begin to shift. The speed of analysis changes. The cost of preparation drastically reduces. The volume of potential reviews we can complete changes. And most importantly, the client's baseline expectation of responsiveness changes. We're moving fast to a world where clients expect real-time responses. You can't wait 2 days to get back to them on something they want to know now. They want to know in the next 20 minutes, half an hour, or an hour. That doesn't eliminate the intermediary, but it does change the operating environment. So the real question, I suppose, becomes what happens when this capability moves from a chat window into the workflows of the business itself? Because that's where we're heading. So what is the next phase? If AI now works with the same inputs that we do, the next question becomes, where is this going? Today, most of us experience AI in a very specific way, right? We open a chat window, maybe we draft an email, we ask it to summarize a document, maybe we brainstorm an idea, and that's all very useful. But it sits beside the work. It's not a part of the work. It doesn't trigger specific actions. It doesn't monitor client needs and update client records, or in short, it doesn't operate your business. Operational AI is different. It's embedded in our day-to-day. It's the difference between asking AI for help and having AI help you to run the process. Also, you may have heard the term agentic AI. That typically refers to AI systems that can take actions, not just generate responses. It has been the buzzword of the last couple of months. Just for clarity, operational AI does include elements of that, but grounded within governance, compliance, and controls. I think it's very important in financial services and any regulated environment for that matter, that agentic capability must always sit within a structured framework. And more importantly, it's got to have some serious human oversight. Okay, so how does operational AI actually work in practice? Let's imagine a client conversation. Might be in person, it might be over Zoom or Teams, maybe it's an email thread, maybe it's a WhatsApp. Traditionally, all of that information sits in very messy forms, right? It's in notes, maybe it's in some emails, some voice recordings, some attached scans of documents, all kinds of different things. The first shift in AI and operational AI is that we can now turn that unstructured input into structured information. It can extract client needs, it can find risk indicators, policy references, coverage gaps, understand financial constraints. Importantly, it creates usable data from human language, and that's step one. Now that structured information flows that into the traditional systems, so we can do things like premium calculations, eligibility rules, compliance checks, etc. And those rules are still deterministic. So they remain rule-based, they're still predictable, and most importantly, those rules are still auditable. So that layer doesn't disappear, and it helps to reassure and bear down this process. Then comes the second layer of the language intelligence. This is where the large language models, with all that context that we spoke about a couple of slides ago, can now directly assist you. They won't make the decision, but they'll help you to interpret the outcome. They can summarize what business rules have produced or the calculator has spat out. It can draft a suitability explanation or highlight where client needs and product features align or where they don't. Maybe it does something simple for you, just like compiling meeting notes. You can translate regulatory language into something a client can actually understand or deep dive into policy documents. This is not the AI giving advice. This is the AI helping you compile, interpret, and document, which again is a very important distinction to hold on to. And then at the end comes the integration. Once you've been through all the outputs of the AI and you've applied your judgment, maybe you've approved stuff or adjusted a few things, rejected some ideas, refined the process, AI can then update the client record or CRM directly. They can log compliance notes. They can trigger documentation. They can prepare renewal schedules or record disclosures. The execution layer still ensures that the process is captured properly. Importantly, though, at no point does AI replace your judgment. It structures information, it applies rules, it assists with interpretation, and it prepares documentation. But the professional decisions remain yours. And in a regulated environment, that's quite important. This is not actually replacing the advisor or broker, it's compressing the mechanical friction around the work we do every day. So where does the human fit in all of this? So far, we looked at two things. The first was why this wave of technology is different. The second is where is AI heading next as it becomes embedded in our operational workflows. So we've seen how AI can structure information, apply rules, assist, interpret, and integrate into business systems. But that leads us to the third question that we opened with. What actually happens to the human? And this is where the conversation often goes wrong, because people tend to jump to one of two extreme conclusions. Either AI is going to replace me completely and I'm going to go sit on the beach in the Bahamas, which would be great. Or a lot of people would say AI changes absolutely nothing. It's great as a handy tool on the side, but I still need to do everything that I need to do before. The reality, I think, is somewhere in the middle. It's neither of those two things exactly. So once AI begins to move into operational workflows, the question really becomes what actually changes in the profession and what doesn't. Of course, whenever there's a new technology, the conversation usually jumps to extremes. So as we said, on one side, people assume the technology will replace you completely, and the others, people assume nothing will change. But what will actually happen is a lot more subtle. A number of the mechanical tasks or the kind of trudge work that we have to do around advice starts to become lighter. It's easier to prepare documents. It's much quicker to gather information. It's much easier to get direct product comparisons on specific features that are important to your clients. It helps you in drafting notes. It produces compliance paperwork, etc. And all of these activities, they still need to happen, but the effort required is now much less. And that's where a lot of the productivity game actually comes from. But when those mechanical tasks become lighter, and something much more interesting happens. The human side of the profession becomes much more valuable, not less. Professional judgment becomes much more important. The client still needs someone who can interpret complex situations and make sound recommendations. Trust and relationships remain central. I can guarantee that a client will much prefer and have a much better appreciation for a recommendation made by an actual human and an advisor than they will from an AI. In fact, in a world where more information is automated, trusted advice becomes even more valuable. Understanding complex needs, like the nuances of a client's financial situation, remains a deeply human. And there's an ethical responsibility that we have that does not disappear. So accountability for advice still sits with the human. This is particularly true in regulated industries like financial services. At this point, people often ask about regulation, and it's important to be clear here. I'll leave a lot of this to Ronald because he's the expert, but in South Africa, frameworks like FIAS and PAPIA are designed to ensure that advice remains accountable and the clients retain the right to human oversight. So while AI can assist with research, preparation, documentation, analysis, the professional remains responsible for any advice that is ultimately delivered. So importantly, the profession doesn't disappear, but the operating environment around the profession changes. AI will not replace trusted advisors, but advisors who use AI will replace those who don't. Okay, so this is all great in principle, Kevin, and you're talking about these wonderful ideas, but is this actually a thing and is it really happening? The answer is yes, it is happening across different parts of financial services. And let me give you three quick examples from some of our global players. Morgan Stanley recently introduced a system that they call AI Debrief, where after any client meeting, their AI summarizes the conversation, drafts follow-up emails, pulls relevant information from their CRM, updates the CRM and compliance records to show that the conversation has happened. And that removes a lot of the administrative work that they used to have to follow after every meeting. And as you can see, almost every advisor now in Morgan Stanley uses it, a 98% adoption rate. I'd really question who the 2% are and why they don't want to use it, but that's a different conversation. From an insurance perspective, Zurich introduced agentic AI to help with multinational policy underwriting. Essentially, the AI just reads through thousands of pages of policy wording, checks regulatory requirements, and prepares a much kind of cleaner summary for the underwriter. The result for Zurich is that complex policies can now be issued about 20% faster than before. And lastly, as an example from the UK, and I think this is going to become much more common and probably not something that we're used to today, where instead of asking potential clients to fill in a form, because we all know that everybody hates to fill in forms online, a lot of firms now are using conversational AI agents that gather basic financial information in a natural conversation, or at least the starting points of that. So by the time the advisor actually speaks to the client, they already have a structured brief, they understand what kind of products they're looking for, what their situation is, and the conversation can start at the advice stage and not at the data collection stage. Across all three of these examples, the pattern is the same. AI isn't replacing the professionals, it's removing the administrative friction around the professional work. So that's all wonderful, but let's take a moment to just balance opportunity with a little bit of reality, right? There's no question that AI's capabilities are impressive, but I think before we go any further, it's very important to balance that excitement with a bit of reality. AI is powerful, but it's not magic. These systems can generate pretty convincing answers very quickly, but they don't actually know things in the way humans do. They're predicting patterns in language and data, and sometimes they can be very confidently wrong. And that's a very important thing to understand. In terms of AI, it'll sound like it knows absolutely everything it's talking about, but can get something very fundamentally wrong. And if you're not an expert, you can look into it and understand, you can very easily fall into a trap there. They also don't understand things like professional responsibility. The AI system doesn't carry a license and it doesn't risk any legal ramifications for whatever answer it gives you. It doesn't hold accountability for advice that's given to a client, and it doesn't understand the ethical or the regulatory context that financial professionals operate in. That responsibility still sits with us. And there are some practical risks that I think we need to be aware of. If these tools are used carelessly, for example, if you paste confidential client information into a public system, you can potentially expose that sensitive data without realizing it. So the goal isn't blind adoption. The goal is to treat AI the way we treat any powerful professional tool, something that can make us effective, but which still requires a bit of judgment, some care, and most importantly, some oversight. So what are some practical guardrails for using AI? First up, treat AI as an assistant, not a decision maker. These tools are extremely useful for drafting, summarizing, analyzing documents, or helping structure ideas, but the final judgment still sits with the human. The anecdote that we often hear about is you should treat AI like a new intern or a new junior who's just joined your team. If you asked your junior who on their first day to do something for you and they got it completely wrong, you wouldn't throw them, fire them on the spot. You'd probably stop for a minute and think, did I give them the right information? Did I give them all the context? And that kind of interaction where you treat the AI as an assistant, you give it information, you let it learn as we go, is getting much better results now. And people are seeing that the AIs can shape much higher level or higher order thoughts, provided they have all of the relevant information. Second guardrail, protecting client and company data. You should never paste sensitive client information. And by that, I mean things like ID numbers or banking details, financial details, or confidential documents like scans of ID documents, etc., into public AI systems. We don't know, and I'll go through it in a bit, a lot of where those systems keep their data and what they do with them. So it's about providing the kind of safe place to process that information. In many cases at the moment, we're seeing increasingly that companies and teams are putting in internal or approved AI platforms where there are data guards in place and the data is protected. And that's giving a lot of people access to these things without necessarily just dropping it into ChatGPT, if that makes sense. The hidden risk, ironic considering we chatted about Read AI at the beginning of the meeting. One area people often overlook is meeting assistants. Many of those tools capture and store full transcripts of conversations. There's an old adage that if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Free tools like that are free for a reason. And that means that client meeting or internal discussions or sensitive information could potentially be recorded and stored somewhere outside of your organization and probably outside of the country, which has direct impacts on things like regulation. So it's important to understand what do the tools actually record when you use them, where is they storing that data, and who has access to it. A lot of these tools sell that data on, and they allow any kind of technical user on their side to be able to go through the conversations and the transcripts in real time. The next guardrail should be relatively straightforward, but it's very important. It's simple verification. AI will produce answers that sound extremely convincing, but are completely wrong. So anything that affects client advice, financial calculations, or some kind of regulatory interpretation must always be verified. We've seen this, especially maths and simple calculations can go very wrong in AI. So it's very important to kind of confirm those the old-fashioned way. And finally, I think it's very important that you understand the tool that you're using. Not all AI systems handle data the same way. Some of them retain prompts and conversations to use to train their models on other inputs. Others are specifically designed for secure enterprise environments where that data is not being shared. When you're in doubt, assume that any information may be stored externally and treated accordingly. And most importantly, if you remember only one thing from this section, don't paste anything into AI that you wouldn't be comfortable emailing to a colleague or a friend. If the information is sensitive enough that you wouldn't casually email it around, it probably shouldn't be going into a public AI tool either. That simple rule has helped me a lot to avoid most of the practical mistakes that people make when they first start experimenting with these systems. But the bigger question, I suppose, is what happens next? Where do we go from here? What we've seen over the last 20 years is that most technologies follow a similar adoption pattern. First, there's an experimentation phase where people try the tools on their own and see what they can do, and they often go outside of company policies and do things they shouldn't. But it's a great way for people to kind of understand what's there and what the capabilities are. Then the productivity improvements start to appear, and people start using the tools to do real work, draft documents, analyze information, prepare work more quickly. The next phase then is where things become more interesting, where AI moves from individual tools into the actual workflows of the organizations, where systems start integrating AI into the research process, into compliance checks, into client engagement, into any of the processes that we go through today. And then eventually, the industry itself begins to evolve around those capabilities. So importantly, that third stage, the operational integration, that's where we're starting to see a lot of movement today. That's operational AI. Once technology begins to move into that phase, the effects usually extend beyond individual productivity. They start affecting the structure of the industry itself, and the ramifications of that can be much bigger than we expect. So if we look a little further ahead, what could happen next? There are a few trends that are starting to emerge. None of these are guaranteed, but they're worth paying attention to, and there's been some noise about some of the stuff you probably will have noticed in the press in the last couple of weeks. First thing is that AI agents are expanding beyond coding. Initially, we saw these systems appear specifically for software development. There's tools that could write or review code. But the same concept is now appearing in a lot of other industries. A good example of that is a new company called Clause, because they use Claude, which uses AI agents to review contracts. They actually offer kind of contract review as a service, where the system can read legal documents, it can extract what are your obligations, it can flag any unusual clauses, it can highlight potential risks automatically. For lawyers and compliance professionals, that removes hours and hours and hours of manual documentation. Again, the human still makes the decisioning, but the AI has already done the heavy lifting. Similar to this, Claude released a tool a couple of weeks ago. I think it's still only to the professional users, called Cowork, which is a dedicated tool that performs AI agent management and kind of deep dive capabilities specifically for non-technical work. And they caused a little bit of noise on the US stock market when they did. I can very easily imagine similar type systems appearing in the financial services space, right? So we're going to have capabilities that review product documentation, apply compliance rules, review client portfolios, and those will all be available as a service or as an agent. The second trend that we're seeing is what some analysts have started calling the SaaS apocalypse, because it caused a massive sell-off in software and technology stocks. For the last 20 years, whenever businesses have had a problem, the answer was usually to go and buy a very specialized, very expensive piece of software. If you needed to store client data, you bought a CRM. If you wanted to run marketing campaigns, you bought marketing software. If you wanted to do some deep dive on your data, you bought analytics software. If you wanted to store client documentation, you bought a document management system. What we're seeing now, and it's very early days, is that AI systems are increasingly capable of performing tasks that previously required these specialized tools. So potentially, instead of needing 5 different applications, an AI agent will be able to orchestrate work across several systems, gather data, summarize it, trigger actions. This, again, doesn't mean software disappears, but it does mean the shape of software may start to change, and the shape of the way we interact with that software will probably change with it. And the last one, I think it's important to touch on because it's an ongoing topic, and I'm sure there'll be questions about it around, will AI take all of our jobs, and will we all end up, in poverty? The third trend is actually quite interesting that we're seeing in that space. There's a concept called the lump of labor fallacy, which says that just because people lose jobs in one side of the economy doesn't mean that they stay unemployed, and actually they'll move into other spaces and grow into new roles. An interesting sub caveat of that, and I think this is going to have an impact both on the work we do and the client base that we talk to. Historically, starting a firm or starting a new business often required a team or at least it required hours and hours and hours of your time, right? You needed researchers and analysts and administrators, you needed operations staff, finance people, etc. What we're seeing is that AI systems can now assist with many of these functions, especially at a basic level. They can research products, they can put together business cases, they can create client briefing documents and draft communications, etc. Which means that a very small team, or realistically even a single professional, may now be able to operate much more efficiently before. And there's a big race at the moment, specifically around AI in the States, around what the first billion-dollar company is going to be that has an employee count of one, or just a single founder. We're still a few years away from that, I think. But this could lead to more specialized advisory firms, and also a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities, and the client base growing significantly as a lot of these new entrants into the market are now in a position to look for different products and services based on their entrepreneurial positions. So the future is not simply about replacing professionals. It might be about changing how professionals work and how firms are structured. And that's a much more interesting question, to be honest, than whether AI will just replace all of the jobs. So in summary, are we building intelligence into everything we do? If we take a step back from all the examples and the guardrails, there's a much broader shift taking place. For most of the digital era, technology helped us automate transactions and digitize processes. But AI is different. It works directly with the information that drives professional work. It works with documents and conversations and research and analysis. What we're beginning to see is a shift from technology as a tool to technology as a participant in the workflow itself. Systems that can read documents, prepare information, help organize work before a human even touches it. That doesn't remove the role of people, but it does change how work is prepared, structured, and delivered. In many cases, it simply removes the friction and the hours spent gathering information, preparing, and organizing. So the real question for individuals and organizations isn't whether AI will appear in the workplace. It's actually, how do we design our ways of working that incorporate intelligence into the process itself? Because the
Sorry, Kevin, I've just lost your sound. I don't know if anyone else has lost your sound.
Correct, Mr. King. We have lost sound.
Kevin, your AI battery is flat.
Did we lose sound somewhere? Apologies.
There you are. You're back.
How close to the end was I? Must have been pretty much there. Can you hear me?
You were just starting to say the opportunity is not to compete. So
yeah. So yeah, I think the opportunity is not necessarily to. It's not whether AI will appear in the workplace. I think that's what's important. It's going to appear in the workplace. The question now is, how do we design our ways of working so that they incorporate intelligence into the process itself? Because the people in the firms who learn to work alongside these systems effectively will likely be the ones who thrive in the coming years. Okay, thank you. Ronald, over to you.
Thanks, Kevin. I think the one thing that you did achieve is give me some comfort. I think lawyers are still going to be the first people that are going to be replaced, but nobody is going to miss them. But there's also, I think, as many questions that has been created than answered. I'm going to start with something that you mentioned in a previous chat that you and I had. So it's a kind of a combined question. I'm going on holiday to Europe in June, and I've basically now asked AI to build me a whole plan. And it's also now asking me to whether I would like to implement the plan. So you mentioned that one of the risks going forward is that people will be asking advice or information from AI, and then from there ask the AI to assist them with the execution. And you were concerned that that might have a big impact in the intermediary space. Can you please explain that a little bit?
Sure. We're actually seeing a big push in that space, specifically focusing around retail at the moment, but it's going to be coming soon, I think, to professional services. With the advent of AI, people are trusting AI a lot more, and for most people, it's actually replacing Google, which is not a thing I thought I would say in my lifetime. So people are having these very kind of one-on-one intimate conversations. They trust the AI to understand their needs, and then at the end of the conversation, they say, "Great, what are my next steps? Where do I go?" And there's a big push, specifically from one of the big AI providers, but I think it'll come to more, to embed things like advertising into that AI conversation. So when you get to the end of the conversation about your trip to Europe, it's going to pop up and say, "By the way, click here to book flights." And the next step after that is agentic AI, which means that you're going to say, "Okay, book my flights," and it's just going to go off and do that. What's interesting from a kind of financial intermediary perspective is, one, what does that mean? Do clients now dictate their own advice? Do they just ask an AI to go and execute something themselves? I don't think that's likely in the near term, because I think clients still want the right answer in that space. It's still a big decision, and even they don't trust AI to that level. But what we are noticing and what's starting to shift is the kind of products and services that you offer is becoming much more complex, because you're no longer selling directly to a client. You're actually selling to an AI that's operating on behalf of the client, if that makes sense. And AIs are really good at kind of condensing stuff and picking out the detail. So we've noticed that we've spent the last 15, 20 years trying to simplify our product sets and trying to make it easier for clients to understand the kind of products and services we offer. What's changing now is you almost have to explode that out again, because AIs are much better at choosing, I want this exact option and I want that exact option. And if you don't have the exact option that you're looking for, or that the AI is looking for, it'll go to someone else that does. So we're starting to see an interesting shift in that space. In summary, we're intermediaries are here for the future. I don't think AI is going to bypass us in any way, but I think the way we operate and the products and services we offer are going to shift as the world does.
There's been quite a few questions here, and you touched on it when you spoke about the guardrails that spoke about protection of client data, and making sure that you comply with POPI and all the other legislation. So how do you go about? You said don't use ChatGPT. Do I need to go and buy my own AI internally for my little practice, or is there something that I can use? What is the options?
I'd quite like to see you setting up your own AI, Ronald. I think it'd be quite entertaining. No, so the big thing for us is data sovereignty. So where does the data live? That's the biggest thing. The consumer accounts that you can get from people like ChatGPT or from Anthropic and Claude, they keep the data on American servers, and they actively use your data to retrain and reuse that data for other AI capabilities. So I think the first step that's important is you need to upgrade, and unfortunately it does come at a cost, to the enterprise kind of offerings from each of those businesses, because they know exactly that this is kind of a big concern. That means that they're not going to be training models and reusing your data. There's still a risk, though, that data could live externally. And what we're seeing a lot of the larger organizations are doing is, Microsoft specifically is very good at this. They offer a kind of intermediate solution in the middle, where I can take an AI product like ChatGPT or Claude from Microsoft, and what Microsoft does is it keeps the data inside my Microsoft tenant, which you've already got like a data sharing agreement with, and they keep that on local servers in South Africa. So my suggestion, twofold. First, maybe don't use the kind of free, definitely not free, or the consumer versions of ChatGPT or Claude. And then secondly, over time, as your needs get bigger and more complex, I think it's important to move to these kind of enterprise scale solutions that keep the data locally and secure.
So when you're talking about Microsoft, you're talking about, like somebody said to me yesterday in a meeting, copylot.
Well,
So the question that comes with this is, and it was an interesting thing that you basically said that you actually believe that this is going to protect the small intermediary out there. This is going to make it possible for them to fight off this wave of regulations and everything that is happening. So if I am a small intermediary out there, what is the next thing that I need to do with regards to AI? How do I start? Do I just sit back and wait and there's going to be something that's going to come this way and I can just put it in? Or is there things that I need to do today already in my practice?
It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, to be honest. AI, everything changes every 6 weeks, and it can be quite frustrating because you feel like you spend, weeks and weeks skilling up, learning, and then next thing you know, somebody releases something in 2 weeks' time and makes it all go away. Having said that, I think the industry is moving very fast, and if you're not up to date with where we are, what the technologies are that are available, you're going to be left behind. Sure, you can wait until somebody releases a tailored product, but by the time they're releasing that tailored product, you probably find that the market has moved again to somewhere new. So my suggestion would be try and stay up to date on the latest offerings from an AI perspective. Don't go into the technical jargon. You don't need to understand about context windows and LLMs and those kind of things. But I do think understanding, what tools are out there, like Claude Cowork, for instance, is very useful. And then most importantly, it's actually about introspection. Where in your process on a given day, in the work that you do, what can an AI do for you instead? And start small, but start getting those processes going through, a corporate ChatGPT or Claude account, and you'll see that you'll instinctively kind of follow that road.
It remains interesting that as the head of architecture, your screen constantly freezes. So it's clear that that AI is still a way to go. The interesting thing, and I read a document from a economist at Stellenbosch University in last week, where he actually was analyzing the impact that AI was having on him as an economist, and he said that because of the fact that, and he actually explained it quite well. He said, in the past, there were certain things that you could do, but the time that it took didn't justify the cost of doing it. The reward versus the time taken wasn't worth it. And he said that what he's experiencing now is there's certain things that he's prepared to do now because of the fact that AI is helping him in speeding it up that he didn't do in the past. So do you have an idea of what are those new sets of skills that we as intermediaries will need to look at because of this whole productivity gain that we're experiencing?
It's very interesting. One of the biggest gains from AI at the moment is that things that used to be too difficult or not worth the effort are now much easier. And where that's really interesting is kind of niche products and niche markets. So specific clients that have had specific needs, but they were, it's a small enough client that it's not really worth the effort. Those are the places where now it is worth the effort because it's much easier to jump in. And I think identifying those niches is going to be the first key thing. And then for me, it's about actually almost practicing, if that makes sense. It's about how do you leverage the tools to get the output that you want, and almost, don't be afraid to talk to AI and ask it. Tell it the situation that you're in, tell it the situation that you want to do, walk through that process, and then it'll help you to understand what are the potential use cases and how do you kind of, how would you need to do that. And I think most importantly, if you ever get to a situation now where you think, oh, that's great, but is the kind of effort worth it? Really stop yourself and think, has this changed? Because realistically now the effort is much lower than it used to be.
Yeah, and talking about all of this productivity gain, to get our CPD, of course, we have to be chatting about this for another hour. So we've got a lot of time for more questions, and the like. So please continue with them. One of the things that I did hear very, very clearly is that everyone that's on here that is using AI assistant, Read AI, and those guys should immediately stop using them because that is a big, big danger to their businesses. Is that what did I hear correctly?
Um, it seems drastic, as you say it like that. I think it's very important to know which tool. We've done a fair bit of work on this. You know, the Microsoft tools are not great in terms of their kind of summarization capabilities, but they're much better than they used to be. There's things, I'm trying to remember, I think it's called Firecracker or Fire something. There's another tool up there. What's starting to happen, similar to the AI models themselves, what's starting to happen is the companies are offering enterprise editions, which allow you to store the data locally rather than on their servers, and most importantly, that make sure they don't reuse that data for anything. So, you know, it's obviously a fireflies. That's it. Thank you. It's obviously important that you balance the tool and the capabilities that you're getting from it from the risk, right? But there are definitely, we know, some, and unfortunately Read AI is one of them, that are very predatory. They actively try and push to your clients. So whenever you have a meeting with a client, your client will get pushed an email, and then they go on the Read AI mailing list, and they will get pushed, you know, regularly every second week or so as to why they haven't signed up. They will take your data, they'll resell it, and those kind of things. So should you cease using them immediately? Some of them, yes, and other ones, obviously not.
I see something from Karen that I was thinking to myself. Normally, when I get voice notes on WhatsApp, I speed them up. If I would ever get a voice note from Kevin, I would probably have to listen to it at half speed because, yes, no, Kevin do speak at an exceptional pace. There is a question there from Karen about Claude. Can you give us it's Claude, and Claude has been this guy has been in the media quite a lot over the past month, I believe. So can you give us a bit of an update? Tell us, what is Claude? What does Claude do? Why is Claude so life-changing at this stage?
So other than they had a really bad weekend amidst all the other global happenings, I think the fundamental difference with Claude, Claude is very similar in the end to ChatGPT. What they do is they package it better in terms of an end user, right? So they've moved away a little bit from this chat interface where it's something that you kind of chat to and ask it questions. And they've moved to, from the technology side, they have these things that they call console apps because developers love to type into consoles and things like that, which essentially in the background goes off and sends off an army of AI agents. So, you know, 5 or 6 different agents go and do different tasks. They've taken that same thing and now they've wrapped it in Cowork. Importantly, I think what Claude has done is their focus is on kind of business users, right? They're not trying to be your personal assistant or your therapist or any of the other things that people are using ChatGPT for. What I think they've done is they've focused on getting high quality, safe and secure products to market. They actually are the only ones that have a really strong AI security and kind of department, and they're the ones who are actively managing things like, is AI becoming sentient, and should we be nice to them now so that they don't, you know, once they take over the world, that they don't come back to us.
So whether I should say please and thank you to ChatGPT. Andre actually asks a very, very good question here. It is clear from your discussion that the reason why you want to go to an enterprise version is because of the protection, the security of data, and everything around that. Is there a way that I could use the free AI versions out there without endangering my practice, without being transgressing regulations, and still get a benefit within my practice?
Absolutely. The difference is that the onus on the data is now on you, if that makes sense. So we're going to try camera B. So can we use the free tools? Absolutely, but you have to be very careful about the kinds of information you're putting in it. You know, it's fine to talk about hypothetical situations. It's fine to ask it, you know, what would it do in this situation? What you can't do is say, this is my strategic plan and I'm going to go after this particular corner of the market and things like that, because that data essentially now is in the public domain. And while it's not publicly accessible at the moment, you don't know what the AI is going to spit out to the next client. When somebody else asks, I've got this great idea for a business, can you help me? And they suddenly spit out your idea because you put it into the AI a few weeks before. And you kind of just have to be smart to say, what information would I share? I almost, if you like, and don't put anything into public AI that you wouldn't email a colleague. Definitely don't put anything into the free tools that you wouldn't stand outside your front door and just shout down the road, because that's essentially what you're doing.
Well, so that would differ because I do weird things that other people would definitely not do. So I would probably use the free version for more things than others would use. Um, I must just at this stage also apologize. It seems that Lizelle van der Merwe has decided that you will start working for the FIA. She wants you to have a monthly AI communication to members to give them an update on what the hell is going on. But she would have to be very nice to you to get that. Um, the the one thing, and you said it at the beginning, and that to me was, I wouldn't say a surprise, but I want to kind of differ from you in two things. I had the benefit through my chess endeavors to meet Mike Hassebis and the guys there at a Deep Mind, and they had me interact there with an AI years ago already, where I kind of realized that access to a lot of data about me makes it easy for a AI to fake human feelings. Because it asked me about my kids, it asked me about my work, and very quickly I forget that this thing is just using data and stuff. So isn't this a risk that our focus on the human touch could still be replaced by AI?
There's always a risk. For me, it becomes a quality conversation. So yes, AI is becoming incredibly good at mimicking human interaction. There've been a number of cases now of having some really adverse effects of people, becoming way too reliant on AIs. I know that ChatGPT had to roll back an instance they had of a new version because people were so used to talking to the previous version they felt like they'd lost their friend, which was an interesting scenario. I think though, what we're going through is not dissimilar from doctors when Google and WebMD became a thing, where in the beginning, everybody was looking up, whatever they'd been diagnosed with, and they were arriving to the doctor with all of these kind of reams of paper to say, this is why you're wrong. You, the professional who's been doing this for 20 years, ChatGPT knows better than you. But I think there's a natural process there that as time goes by, the quality of the advice we provide and the quality of the services we offer will actually outshine the kind of AI tools. Is there a risk that some clients will end up going the AI way anyway? That's always a risk. But also, I think by focusing on the quality and focusing on making sure that we're delivering the best value we can, clients will always come back to where they get the right answer.
I think you've touched there on the final question. Unfortunately, there's a lot of other questions that I've written down that I would like to have asked professional judgment, because I do believe that AI would probably be very good at picking stocks, or doing asset allocation for clients. So I was wondering how you address that, and if my skill was to build a share portfolio for a client, isn't it going to be easy for AI to do just that? Because it's got all the data. It actually can read the information about Richmond, De Beers, about Naspers quicker. It can make the assessments. It can calculate all of that. And it can do those purchases quicker than I can do it. So to my mind, professional judgment, I've got a risk there.
Absolutely. But we're starting to see unintended consequences in that space as well. And I think it's going to apply to broader kind of professional judgment. So there's a concept now emerging specifically in kind of the American markets, but, equities markets around the world, called the kind of AI herd or the thundering storm, where all of the AIs do the same analysis. So they read the same information just as quickly as you did. And they're all in pretty much real time come to the same conclusion that we should sell this stock and buy that stock. And suddenly what you see on the market is this huge shift. I think I saw a crazy stat the other day that nearly 60% of the trades now on the NASDAQ are automated, fully AI automated, not a human clicking a button. And what that's doing is you get this overcorrection. So now, they see it, then they see the price rising, then that kind of reaffirms for the AI that it's done the right thing, and then it overprices and then it drops again. You end up with this kind of over and back. What's proving to be true, and I think this is important, not just in your specific example, but in all professional judgment, is a bit of a return to fundamentals, right? This is no longer about, can I predict the next best thing on the stock market? This is about, what are the things about a specific company that add value, that structure or hold up the share price. It's about picking long-term value and picking those right fundamentals rather than trying to follow the AI wave. And we've already seen that that's starting to have better returns than pure AI plays. Of course, the people with the most successful AI plays are not going to share that their algorithm or how they're doing it. But I do think that for all professional judgment, there's going to be a pushback to fundamentals, your years of experience, and knowing the kind of the right answer and why, rather than just following the data like the AI does.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for today. If you wanted to end off with one last thought for everybody that has dialed in today, what would that be?
I think the big thing is AI is here. It's not something to be scared of. Try using it, even in small use cases that you can around your life, and look forward to the space, because I think we're all going to be doing really interesting stuff in a couple of years that we haven't even thought of yet.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much, Sandra, for setting this up. Thanks again for all of the members of the FIA. I hoped as the FIA we could have given you some insight here from out of the engine room of PSG. Thanks, Kevin, for doing all of this. And I hope that we have added some value to you. We might just ask you at a next conference or stuff to come and talk to us again, because I can see there's a lot of questions and interest that we still need to address.
Always happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ronald. Thank you, Kevin, for this morning. So appreciate. Thank you to the members for joining. Yes, I think that might have raised more questions, but maybe some level of confidence to start to dip into it, and at least get your toes wet and understand that it's not as scary as what it is, but just be clever in your choices of what you're using. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Again, a reminder, we'll upload this onto our YouTube channel so that you can go back and have a look at it, revisit. For those who attended, we'll share the presentation with you. Thank you, Kevin, for agreeing to share that presentation. And we are accrediting this for CPD. It is in the pipeline at the moment. And yes, end of May is the end of the current cycle. So if you haven't been on the CPD platform lately, please go on. There is a lot of good material there as well for you to have available to utilize as part of your membership. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you to Wahida for assisting in the background. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Thank you so much.